My name is Madeline Carter. I'm 38 years old, a certified jewelry authentication expert, and the founder of a private business now valued at over $12 million. But that's not how my family sees me. To them, I've always just been Rachel's older sister, the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who always steps aside. This past Thanksgiving was supposed to be a simple family dinner. I brought wine, pumpkin pie, and the same olive green casserole dish I carried every year. But the mood shifted when Rachel stood up to show everyone an article she found online. It was a small feature in a financial magazine about my company. My name was right there, in black and white. She stared at me like I was a stranger. "Wait," she said, "you're a millionaire?" I nodded, unsure of what reaction to expect. For a few seconds, no one said a word. Then came the questions. The tone shifted from surprise to entitlement. My parents wanted to know why I had never told them. My uncle asked how much I was willing to share. Rachel looked me straight in the eye and said, "You know I deserve some of that, right?" That's when I realized even now, even after everything, they still believed I owed them something just because we shared blood. But the truth is, I built every bit of that fortune on my own. It wasn't revenge money. It wasn't inheritance. It was built from long nights, quiet sacrifices, and years of being forgotten. Being invisible taught me how to survive. Being ignored taught me how to succeed. And this is the story of how the family who never saw me suddenly demanded everything once they realized I had something they wanted. I was 8 when everything shifted. Until then, life was what you'd expect from a modest, middle-class family in Ohio. My parents weren't overly affectionate, but they were present. My mom helped me with school projects, and my dad took me fishing a few weekends in the summer. We weren't perfect, but we were okay. Then came Rachel. She arrived 2 months early, tiny and fragile, hooked up to wires and machines in the hospital. The night she was born, my Aunt Kelly showed up at 2 a.m. and told me to pack a bag. "You'll stay with me for a while," she said. "Your mom's in the hospital." For weeks, I was shuffled between homes while the family focused on Rachel. When she finally came home, the house transformed into a sterile lab. Hand sanitizer stations appeared in every room. My mom wore gloves. Bleach became the new household scent. If I sneezed, I was sent away. A mild cough meant I'd be spending the weekend at Grandma Marie's. At first, it felt like an adventure: cookies, bedtime stories, and Nancy Drew books. But after the 3rd or 4th time, I understood I wasn't being protected. I was being removed. At home, I became an outsider. I wasn't allowed to touch Rachel or even breathe near her. My parents started to speak in hushed tones when I entered the room. When I asked questions, they said, "You're old enough to understand." But I wasn't. I was just a kid. The worst part? They rewrote the story in their heads. "Madeline's always been independent," they'd say. "She understands Rachel needs more attention." No, I didn't. I was 8 years old and confused about why being healthy made me unworthy of love. Overnight, my world became divided. Rachel was the fragile miracle. I was the sturdy, silent shadow. And that's how it began, the slow, invisible unraveling of my place in the family. Looking back, I can see how those early years shaped me. I didn't cry much. I didn't ask for help. I became the child who didn't cause trouble, because I learned quickly troublemakers get noticed, and I had already been erased. But what they didn't realize was this: when no one claps for you, you learn how to clap for yourself. By the time I was 12, I had already accepted the rules of the household: Rachel first, always. If she had a headache, the house went silent. If she had a cough, the world stopped spinning. And if I achieved something worth celebrating, it was usually met with a distracted nod or a request to keep my voice down, because Rachel needed to concentrate. I remember practicing for months to perform Bridge Over Troubled Water at the school talent show. I was nervous, excited, hopeful. But on the night of the performance, Rachel had a 99.1-degree fever. Not even an actual illness, just enough to cause alarm. My mom stayed home to monitor her, and my dad didn't want to leave her alone. No one came. 2 weeks later, the entire family, including both sets of grandparents, attended Rachel's 15-minute flute recital. She played Hot Cross Buns off key, but the applause was thunderous. At school, I stopped inviting them to things. Still, I pushed forward. I started reading obsessively, diving into books about art, history, and vintage objects. My bedroom became my sanctuary, not because it was cozy, but because Rachel claimed she was allergic to my lavender air freshener, which meant it was the one place she wouldn't enter. I got straight A's. I won the school science fair with a project on renewable energy. My dad asked if I could store the display board in the garage, because Rachel was allergic to cardboard dust. Yes, apparently that was a thing now. When I received a perfect score on my essays minus 1,600, no mistakes, I came home thrilled. I ran into the kitchen and showed the results to my mom. She barely looked up from Rachel's homework. "That's nice, sweetie," she said. "Can you keep it down? Rachel has a big test tomorrow." That night, her C in English earned a spot on the refrigerator. Mine, tucked away in a folder under my bed. By junior year, I was determined to escape. I applied to 15 colleges without telling anyone. I wrote every essay, filled out every financial aid form, and scheduled every interview on my own. My guidance counselor, Mr. Chen, became the only adult who believed in me. When the acceptance letters started arriving, Harvard, Yale, Michigan, Princeton, I kept them in a locked box under my bed. I knew the second Rachel found out, they'd find a way to make it about her. She'd say something like, "If Maddie leaves, I'll be all alone." And just like that, I'd be asked to stay. So I didn't tell them anything until I'd made my decision. The day I chose the University of Michigan, Rachel made the JV cheerleading squad. My family took her out to Olive Garden. I microwaved macaroni in my room. That was the night I made myself a promise. If no one was going to show up for me, I'd build a life so complete they'd regret never looking. And I meant every word. College was freedom. I worked double shifts at Carson's Diner that summer before school. Carol, the owner, was the first person outside my guidance counselor to ask what I wanted to do with my life. When I told her I liked old jewelry and history, she smiled and said, "Then don't waste your eyes on fry grease forever." I didn't. I studied hard, lived cheap, and spent most of my time at the university library. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in art history and museum studies. My family didn't attend the ceremony. Rachel had just transferred to her third college in 2 years, and they were busy helping her move. My first job was at Everett Pearson, a respected auction house in Detroit. I was an entry-level analyst in their estate sales division. Mostly I cataloged silverware, sorted through dusty boxes of old teacups, and double-checked client paperwork. It was quiet, repetitive work, but it felt good to be trusted with something. One afternoon, I was sorting through the Kingston estate, a massive inheritance from a widow with no children. Her jewelry collection had been dismissed as costume pieces. Boxes of it, plastic beads, fake pearls, tarnished clasps. Except one piece stood out. A small brooch, simple in design, but heavy in hand. Its clasp was too intricate, too refined for anything mass-produced. I spent my lunch break researching antique signatures. I stayed late that night, using the company subscription to dig through Art Deco databases. The more I looked, the more I believed this wasn't costume jewelry. It was authentic and rare. But I was the new girl. Nobody wanted to hear that the intern thought she'd found a lost treasure. So I built my case. I printed photos, diagrams, historical notes. I spent 2 weeks of lunches building a quiet, undeniable argument. When I finally showed it to my supervisor, he barely glanced up from his phone. "Already cataloged those as costume," he muttered. I stood firm. "Just look at the clasp." He did. Then he asked where I'd learned this. I told him, research. The brooch sold for $47,000. It had been part of a 1925 Cartier collection thought to be scattered after World War II. From that moment on, he started giving me more items to review. I wasn't just the girl in the background anymore. I was starting to matter. And more importantly, I was building something for myself, not because anyone expected it of me, but because I had grown used to being overlooked. The world had taught me that silence wasn't protection, it was preparation. That brooch changed my trajectory. Not because of the money, but because it reminded me of something my grandmother used to say when she let me play with her old costume rings. Sometimes the real value is hidden under the dust. You just have to know where to look. After the Kingston brooch, something shifted. My supervisor, Mr. Harrison, started handing me trickier assignments. He called them long shots, pieces no one else had time for. I took them gladly. I spent nights poring over gemology books, weekends visiting antique shows, and whatever spare money I had went into online courses about jewelry authentication. My apartment turned into a museum lab, magnifying lamps, loop lenses, and printouts of Hallmark guides taped to the walls. I didn't date. I didn't party. I was chasing something bigger than anyone around me could see. 2 years in, we took on the Rothwell estate. Old money. The kind that didn't make headlines but owned property in 4 countries. While the team was focused on the big-ticket items, gold watches, diamond necklaces, I noticed a pendant tucked into a velvet pouch labeled miscellaneous. It didn't look like much, just a delicate Art Nouveau piece with curling enamel leaves. But something about the craftsmanship caught my eye. I spent 3 days digging. Barely slept. Cross-referenced marks with old French catalogs, studied its chain links under a microscope, compared class models from early 20th century archives. It turned out to be a lost piece from a private collection believed to have disappeared during World War II. It sold for $238,000. Mr. Harrison called me into his office the next day. I expected a promotion. Instead, he said, "You're wasting your talent here. You should be running your own business." At first I laughed. With what money? I was still eating ramen noodles and paying off student loans. But his words stuck, and once they took root, they grew. I started doing freelance work on the side, verifying estate pieces for small dealers, advising private collectors who couldn't afford full-time experts. Word spread. I didn't advertise. I didn't need to. The antique world is small and full of whispers. Eventually I made a decision. I took a loan against my car, emptied what little savings I had, rented a tiny office above a Chinese takeout place. The rent was low, the Wi-Fi barely worked unless you stood by the window, and the air always smelled like Kung Pao chicken. But it was mine. I painted the walls myself, brought in a thrift store desk, hung up my grandmother's frame quote, "Find the real value." It wasn't fancy, it wasn't comfortable. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't building someone else's dream. I was building mine. The early months were terrifying. Some nights I woke up at 3 a.m., calculating how many weeks I had left before I'd have to shut it all down. Some days, I sat at my desk for hours, waiting for an email, a call, a sign I hadn't made a huge mistake. And slowly they came. One client became 3. 3 became 10. A retired collector passed my name to a law firm managing high-profile estates. A socialite's assistant walked in with her late mother's jewelry box and walked out stunned by how much it was worth. My commissions grew, so did my confidence. But I didn't tell my family. Not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because I knew they wouldn't care. At every Sunday dinner, the conversation was still the same. Rachel's starting a new podcast. Rachel might move to LA. My mother would glance at me and say, "Madeline's still at that little antique shop, right?" I'd smile and say something like that. And I kept building in silence. Because some victories are sweeter when no one's watching. It was the first time I had hosted Thanksgiving in years. I brought wine, 2 pies, and a quiet sense of pride. My business had just passed the $12 million valuation mark. I didn't expect anyone at that table to know or care. I was used to that. I came for the ritual, the habit of showing up. Dinner was almost over when Rachel, scrolling on her phone between bites, suddenly froze. She turned the screen to my mother. "Mom," she said, voice rising. "Is this Madeline?" My mother squinted. "What is it?" Rachel read aloud. "Madeline Carter, CEO of Carter Authentics, closes multi-million-dollar estate deal in exclusive Westchester auction." She looked up at me. "Wait, you're a millionaire?" All eyes turned. I nodded, unsure of how else to respond. It wasn't something I flaunted. My company didn't bear my face, just my name. But yes, it was me. "What do you mean, millionaire?" my uncle asked. Rachel's face twisted. "You're sitting on millions and didn't think to tell your family?" "I built my business quietly," I said. "It's never really come up." That's when the mood turned. My mom leaned forward. Rachel could use help with her student loans. "Her car's falling apart," my dad added. Rachel crossed her arms. "I mean, you don't have kids. I do. Shouldn't the money go to where it matters more?" I put my fork down. This wasn't surprise, it wasn't curiosity, it was entitlement. And for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. I looked directly at Rachel. "You're right. I don't have kids. But I also didn't have parents who showed up for me. I built what I had alone. You all made it clear for years I was the strong one, the independent one. I survived being overlooked. I don't owe anyone for that." Silence. Then, as if to twist the knife, my mother said, "We just thought family meant something to you." I smiled, not cruelly, just honestly. "It does. It means not being treated like a bank." I stood up, gathered my things, and left before dessert. There were no angry words, no shouting, just a quiet, decisive end to a dynamic that had lasted my entire life. They weren't angry that I had succeeded. They were angry that I had done it without them and didn't need them now. But that's the thing about being invisible for so long. Eventually, you stop waiting to be seen. And you learn how to walk away, with nothing but your peace and everything you've built in silence. The next morning, I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. I already knew what the text would say: accusations wrapped in guilt, reminders of childhood, veiled threats about family loyalty. But I had made my choice the night before, not out of anger, not out of revenge, out of clarity. For the first time, I understood that no amount of money, success, or sacrifice would ever change how they saw me. I would always be the backup plan, the one expected to give and give quietly. So I poured myself a cup of coffee, went to my office, and got back to work. That afternoon, I authenticated a rare Victorian mourning ring, and my assistant told me a museum in Boston wanted to collaborate on an exhibit. I nodded, smiled, and added it to my list of things to follow up on. But later that evening, when the building emptied out and the lights dimmed, I opened my laptop, pulled up an old video of Simon Garfunkel performing Bridge Over Troubled Water, and hit play. It was the song I had practiced for that school talent show, the one no one came to. I closed my eyes and listened, letting the music fill the quiet of the room, not with regret, not with sorrow, but with peace. "This one's for me," I whispered. Not for the applause, not for recognition, but for the 8-year-old girl who learned to smile through silence. The teenager who microwaved her own birthday dinner. The woman who built an empire from a dusty storage room above a takeout joint. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Because I had already grieved the family I never truly had. And now I was free. Sometimes, walking away isn't the sad part. Sometimes, it's the beginning of everything you were always meant to be. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, or gave enough, my family would finally see me. That one day they'd say, "We were wrong, you mattered all along." But that day never came. And somewhere along the way I stopped needing it to. Because the truth is, your worth isn't measured by who claps for you. It's measured by what you build when no one's watching. It's in the quiet nights you choose discipline over despair. The mornings you show up for yourself, even when no one else does. I didn't become successful to prove anything to them. I did it because I wanted a life that felt like mine. A life built on authenticity, not obligation. To anyone out there who feels like the forgotten one, the overlooked sibling, the silent child, I see you. I've been you. And I want you to know something: you don't need permission to thrive. You don't need their recognition to matter. Sometimes the strongest kind of revenge is peace. Peace in knowing you made it. Peace in not needing the people who never showed up. Peace in closing the door and not waiting for them to follow. If this story speaks to you, if you've ever felt invisible, I hope you'll remember this. You don't have to fight for a seat at someone else's table. Build your own. And when you do, sit tall, breathe deep, and be proud. Because the life you build in silence, that's the one that shines the brightest. Like, share, and comment if this story resonated with you, and never forget your story matters, even if they never read it.